Hi everyone, my name is Amber, welcome back to my channel. This is my October wrap up. I read 19 books in October. I don't really know how that happened, but I'm not going to complain. These are some of them and I'm going to talk through them. So I'm going to go in order of when I finished them, just because that's going to be a bit easier for me. I'm going to try not to spend too much time talking about all of the books, but I'm definitely going to talk a lot about my favourites because there were quite a few really good ones this month. And then at the end of the video, I'm also going to talk about some of the books I'm still in the middle of because I didn't finish all of my October reading. Even though I did read 19 books, it was a complete fluke. I don't know what happened. Okay, so to kick us off, I read White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. This was my first read for October. It really put me in the spooky mindset, which was kind of my goal for the month, as was most people's. I think a lot of people were trying to read spooky books in October, and I certainly read a few. So White Smoke is about a girl whose name I can't remember because I'm really bad with names, I'm really sorry, whose family have won a chance to live in a house for I think a year or two until they get the chance to buy it. It's some sort of like charity program sort of thing. They move in and they realise that the neighbourhood has some history and it's a bit creepier than they thought that it was going to be, and the house might be haunted. That's all I'm going to say about the plot. I really enjoyed this one. I love Tiffany Jackson's writing. I've read through all of her books now and I am going to be uploading a video talking about all of them and ranking them for you, so you know which one is best in my opinion. That will be in a couple of weeks because it's going to be a pain to edit. But White Smoke I gave 4 stars. I very much enjoyed it. I really connected with the main character, who, by the way, trigger warning, she is dealing with some drug addiction problems or drug reliance, I guess. She smokes a lot of weed basically to kind of get her through the day. So please be aware that there is drug use in this book, and she also grows some marijuana as well. So if that's going to trigger you, that's something that you should know. This one was so creepy. So it has a few of my kind of creepiest tropes, I guess, things that really get to me, like creepy children, particularly creepy children who scream. That's a very specific thing that often, you know, creeps me out. Creepy house stuff that could perhaps be home invasion, or it could be something spooky. Those tropes are things that really get to me in horror books, and this book had both of them. Next, I read Felix Ever After, which is a YA contemporary book. This one is about a trans boy called Felix who is out as being trans, and he's doing a summer program, I think it is, or at least it's like a school program in the holidays or something, and someone puts up old photos of him from before he transitioned and dead names him as well, so all of his classmates see that, and it's not a very good experience for him. So Felix spends the whole book trying to figure out who's done this to him, why they would do that, and along the way he falls for another guy. The two of them become closer via text messages, and I did really enjoy this one. I didn't love the way that the romance went. I don't want to spoil anything, but it didn't end the way that I wanted it to. I didn't really love it. I can't really explain why without giving spoilers, but who Felix ended up with was not my favourite because we didn't have enough time in that kind of mindset. If that makes any sense. I don't think it does, but if you've read it, maybe you know what I mean. I prefer more build up for my ships, and there wasn't enough here for me. But I very much enjoyed this book, and I was very surprised to see some reviews talking about how Felix is a really unlikable character and people should be wary of that, but I don't think he's unlikable at all. He's obviously going through some shit, so he has a lot to deal with, and he doesn't necessarily have the most positive attitude throughout the book, but there are moments, and he's not like the most negative character, and I don't think he's like one that you would hate. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't really know where that came from. I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Next, I read For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. I read this one with my friend Kayla. We're both huge Samantha Downing fans from her first 2 books, so we decided to read this one together. Got this one from the library, which is why I don't have it here with me. I gave this one 3.5 stars. It was good, but not as good as her previous book. So this follows a teacher who's at a fancy private school, and he's very harsh on the students. He says that this is because he wants them to do well and he wants them to cope in the future, but he's basically just an arse. And then people start dying at the private school, and the teacher may or may not have had something to do with it. And it follows multiple points of view. None of the points of view are very likeable at all, as is the case with all of Samantha Downing's books. She doesn't write likeable characters. You're going to hate every single one of them. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, really. It actually adds something quite different to what a lot of authors tend to do, with having the main character be likeable and someone that you're rooting for, and the other characters being against the likeable main character, whereas Samantha Downing, like, you don't like any of her characters. They're all awful people, and I like that, and that's what I liked about this book. This one was a bit kind of batshit crazy. I don't really know how else to describe it. It was all over the place, and it just wasn't my favourite of hers. I still flew through it though, and Kayla and I both ended up really enjoying it, so I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I listened to Disfigured as an audiobook. I gave this one 3.5 stars. It was very good. I liked the personal touch that the author put on it. So basically this is a non-fiction book about disability within fairy tales. I think I was expecting a little bit something different from it. I think I was expecting more of an analysis, a deep dive analysis into different fairy fairy tales and talking about the disability rep or the problematic disability kind of, I guess it's still rep, isn't it, even if it's really bad, in these folk tales, in these fairy tales. But I didn't really get as much substance as I was hoping for. A lot of the stuff that the author talked about was her own personal experience, which was good, but not really what I signed up for. So I think that my expectations were a little bit off for this one. So I gave it 3.5 stars. It was a very good book still, and I would recommend it, but it's not the deep dive analysis as I think it's being promoted as. I then read Not Even Bones, which is a YA kind of urban fantasy paranormal type book. This is about a main character whose mother captures magical beings and kind of sells off their organs or like their blood or their fingertips, for example, on the black market. And the main character is also a different kind of creature. She's not human, but they're keeping that kind of on the down low. So this sort of magical world is actually known to humans as well. It's not like an epic fantasy or high fantasy book where it's not set in our world. In this, the magical beings are sort of interwoven with our own. I liked this one. It was just kind of a okay paranormal book, and I like the characters most of all. It was very, very interesting, and I would be interested in reading the sequels, but I might not buy them. I'll probably get them from the library if my library does them. I don't know if this is available in the UK. It doesn't really stand out to me, but it's one that I did enjoy. Next, I read Cast as part of, I think it was Jess Owens's non-fiction book club. I can't remember the name of it. This is really bad of me. I'm going to put the logo up here. I try to join in whenever I can. I had Cast as an audiobook, so I listened to it. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. A lot of people have said that, or in the book club have said, it's a good like starter book for this kind of topic. It's basically talking about the caste system in the US and how it's very similar to the caste system in India, for example, but no one actually calls it a caste system over in the US. I agree that it's a very good starter book. I would go a little bit further and say that it was actually quite a good book in general, because that's not really a connection that I have personally made, even though I have read quite a few books about race and black people in America at this point. Not loads, I'm not an expert or anything, but I've read quite a few and none of them have really touched on this topic in the same way. So I imagine if you are very well versed in this topic, then it's not going to be the most original, it's not going to tell you any new information, but for me it was good, even though I have read similar books in the past. So I gave it 4 stars. Then, completely on a whim, I decided to read the It Girl series, or the first book by Cicely Von something or other. She's the author of Gossip Girl, and I actually read this book when I was younger, so this is a reread for me, and it was really good. It held up quite well, I thought. Not amazingly. It was published in 2005, so there were some issues with it. I still enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. I think at the time I gave it 4 or 5, and that was when I would have been about 13. I think this is what kickstarted my love for boarding school books. So this is about Jenny Humphrey from Gossip Girl. This is her spin-off series, and she's going off to a private boarding school. I think something really bad happened in the Gossip Girl books to make her sort of diverge and do her own thing, and it's basically just a ton of drama, which I really actually enjoyed. I really like rich people drama, I really like boarding schools, so I gave this one 3 stars. I'm probably going to carry on reading this series because it's going to be like not a guilty pleasure, it's going to be kind of my trashy read for when I'm in the mood for something on that kind of level. Next, I finally read Black Sun, which I was supposed to read ages ago for Space Sirens Book Club, which is a book club that I'm in with a bunch of friends, but I didn't. I think I got about 2 chapters in and I just wasn't connecting with it at the time, so I put it down on like pause. That was via ebooks. Then I bought the physical copy. This was prompted by someone requesting a recap from Recaptains, and I thought I should probably get to it because it's a really popular book, and I actually loved it. I gave it 4 stars. Like I said, I couldn't get into it at the time when I first picked it up, put it on pause for a bit, and I ended up really, really enjoying it. So this is a fantasy world. I don't really know how to describe it in kind of a very short summary. Basically, in this book, it's high fantasy, so it's not set in our world. I think that's what high fantasy is. It's not set in our world anyway. According to prophecy, during this celestial event of the Black Sun, the world is going to become unbalanced. So there are, I think, 3 main characters. One of them is a sailor, and she's really good with like water. She's a bit like a waterbender, but not really. And then you've got the prophesized kind of guy who has been blinded from a young age and kind of groomed to fulfill this prophecy. And then you've got the sun priest, who is on kind of the opposite side to what the other guys are doing, kind of. And it's all about the lead up to this celestial event, the eclipse, and how the characters are all going to come together. Stuff is going to go down. That's probably the briefest summary I can come up with. It's quite intense, I thought. I actually compared this one a little bit to The Bone Shard Daughter, but I think that's mainly because of the sailing stuff, because there's a lot of sailing in this one, and there also was a lot of sailing in The Bone Shard Daughter, so that's where the comparison comes up for me. This one ended up being really, really fast-paced. It didn't take long for me to get into at all the second time around. The language is very easy to read and flowing, very, very good. I really like the characters as well, even though they didn't really stand out that much to me. I don't think they were all that amazing. I don't think they're ones that I'm going to remember forever, but I will remember the events in this book because it was really action-packed. A lot of intense things happened, and so I ended up really enjoying it, so I gave it 4 stars and I'm really excited for the sequel. Next I read 9 Fox Gambia, which I gave 2 stars. I don't really want to talk about this one much, and I can't really give you a summary because I have no clue what it's about. So this was another Space Sirens book club book, and all of the other hosts really enjoyed it. I think some really loved it, which is surprising to me. I think I was the only one who didn't really like it all that much. So basically I just found the writing style very confusing. The world building wasn't really all that good. It wasn't described or explained very well for a sci-fi book. You kind of have to just accept that it's not going to make much sense, and it's more of a fantasy book in that sense, I think. I don't know if you'll disagree with me if you've read the book. I didn't enjoy it, I couldn't get into it. What I can tell you is that it's about a girl who has to share her body, or a woman who has to share her body with a disembodied man in order to do something that I don't really know what. So please go and read Goodreads reviews because it didn't make much sense to me, but it might make sense to you. Then I read One True Loves by Elise Bryant. This is her second YA contemporary book. I gave this one 2.5 stars. I gave her previous book 4 stars because it was excellent. This one wasn't so good. So this has been pitched as a cruise ship book. So the main character goes on a cruise ship and wants to kind of decide what she's going to do for the rest of her life at university, and you know, beyond. Her parents are pressuring her to make a decision because she's very indecisive, so she's hoping this cruise ship holiday can sort of push her in the right direction or give her some answers, and she meets a guy on there, and that's pretty much it. I was hoping for a bit more travel, to be honest, and some more exciting stops along this cruise because that's one of my favourite part of kind of travel foreign books, but that didn't really happen, so it was kind of a letdown in that sense, and I didn't really feel the main ship. So I gave this 2.5 stars, but it's definitely not a bad book. It was just kind of middle of the road average. I then read Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it so much. So this is a courtroom drama. It follows a bunch of characters, but basically what happens is there's this doctor who has a miracle submarine, which is basically like an alternate treatment facility which parents go to with their kids who have like autism or cerebral palsy or whatever, various different conditions. There's also a man there who's infertile. I think he's got like a low sperm count or something. They all go and sit in this chamber which has varying oxygen levels, and this is meant to cure them. It explodes. 1 child and 1 adult die, various people are injured, and so there's a court case. The jury are trying to decide whether it's murder, whether it's an accident, who did it for one thing, and I really enjoyed it. I loved it so much. So you follow, it starts off in the prologue with the chamber exploding, like the incident. I think the first chapter is actually called The Incident as well. And then it flips between different characters who all sort of describe what happened that night during different days of the court case. There's someone taking up as witnesses, others aren't, others are waiting for their chance to be a witness, but they haven't been called up yet. And it was fantastic. I would highly recommend this one if you like literary fiction, contemporary fiction, a bit of thriller and mystery as well. I honestly can't recommend this one enough, so please go and check it out if it sounds like your kind of thing. And then I read The Girl from the Well. This was another buddy read with Kayla and also our friend Justine from I Should Read That. So this is a YA horror book, and oh my god, it's one of the scariest YA books I've ever read. It was so creepy. The author really pulled from various different horror tropes and merged them all together, so it was kind of like The Ring meets The Exorcist meets various other things. It was very good, and I highly enjoyed it. I don't really have much to say about it other than I gave it 4 stars, and I would recommend the audiobook. It's a very quick one to read. It is the first in a series. I think there are 2 books. I wouldn't necessarily say you have to read the sequel. I think this one ended really well, and there wasn't really much to continue on with, so I think it wrapped up nicely, which works out well for me because I don't think I want to read the sequel, at least not until next year. I think this one was really well told, and the most important thing for this is that it's so creepy. So if you want a creepy YA horror book, then this one is probably for you. And then we're on to Dui's 24-hour readathon books, and I read 3.5 to 4 books for that. First one was Kill Creek, which I gave 3 stars. This one is about a group of writers who go to stay at a haunted house. They're kind of dragged there unknowingly against their will, and they have to spend the night there, and this kind of affects them in various different ways later on. I thought that this entire book was going to be set at the haunted house and that it was going to be really creepy and atmospheric, but it wasn't. Like, some parts were really creepy. I enjoyed the overnight bit at the haunted house, but it was a bit of a letdown. So I gave this one 3 stars because it did keep me reading, but I wish that the whole book had taken place in that one night, or 2 different nights maybe at the same location, rather than following characters as they went elsewhere. But it just didn't really appeal to me all that much, so I gave it 3 stars. Bit of a letdown. I'm a little bit disappointed. Then I read Lock and Key, which was a reread for me. I love this series so much. I've read all of them. It's one of my all-time favourite graphic novel series. So this is about a group of children who have to go and live at the Key house because their father is murdered one day during the summer, and so they and their mother go and stay with their uncle at the Key house. And then there are these keys that do various different things. One can turn you into the opposite gender, one can help you travel to different places, one can make you fly. There are so many different keys, and this house has like a whole history to it as well as these keys, and it's so interesting, so good. Every time I talk about it, I tell you that the villain is one of the best villains I've ever read about, and yeah, that's all I have to say. So I gave this one 4 stars. It's probably more like 4.5 really, because it's fantastic. I then read You'll Be the Death of Me by Karen M. McManus. I'm doing a full review of this one on my channel because I received it as an e-arc. That should be up in a couple of weeks, I think. So this one is about 3 friends who skip school for one reason or another. They're not really friends actually in the beginning, they're students who go to school together. And so they skip school and then they come across a dead body. This one was a bit of a letdown for me as well because I didn't love the book. I tend to really enjoy Karen M. McManus's thrillers, but this one had something missing, I think. And I think it might be partly because it's not set in a small town location. It's a bit bigger in scale and there's a bigger sort of thing going on. So it's not just like small town murder, revenge stuff. And so I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it either. So I gave it 3 stars. It's very like average, middle of the road. Like I said, I'll do a full review on it soon. I then read Rock, Paper, Scissors, which is an adult thriller by Alice Feeney, and I quite enjoyed this one actually. I really liked the setting in particular. It's set mostly in the Scottish Highlands in an old chapel, and it's very atmospheric and creepy. It's about 2 people. They're married and the husband has the condition also known as face blindness. I can't remember what the actual scientific name for it is. It's in the book, but I can't remember. But basically he is unable to recognise people's faces. And I have to say, I thought that was going to play a bigger part in this, but for some reason it didn't. Nevertheless though, I really enjoyed it. I like the format that it was told in. So it was told in present day from 2 different points of view, the husband and the wife, and then the wife's letters were also there. So she wrote her husband a letter on every single anniversary, and the book includes those in various points as well instead of flashbacks. I thought that was really good, really manipulative and really good. So I gave this one 4 stars. Next I read Falling, which is an adult thriller. I had to think about the genre there, but I think it's definitely a thriller. So this is about a pilot and a flight attendant. Basically one day the pilot is held hostage in the cabin and he is told that he either has to crash the plane in an unspecified location, it will be told to him later, or his family will be killed. Someone on the ground is communicating with him and threatening his family, so he has to make the choice between the plane full of people or his very small family. I really enjoyed this one. Actually, the author used to be a flight attendant, and from the Goodreads reviews it sounds like she's really not only done her research but used her experience as a flight attendant to really craft a very personal story, I thought, for a thriller book. A lot of it seems to be very accurate. A lot of the language used and what the people would do in these situations seems to be really on point. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I don't know if it's the best book ever, but it kept me gripped. I couldn't stop reading it, and I think I read it in like 2 sittings because I was just so afraid of what would happen to this flight attendant in particular, but also the pilot and his family. Like, I was quite scared of that as well. Then I read Geekerella. I listened to this one as an audiobook. Can I just say, the audiobook narrator for the guy's point of view, Darian, pissed me off so much. He didn't know how to pronounce Dalek. He's meant to be like a giant nerd who goes to conventions or wants to go to conventions. He kept pronouncing stuff wrong, so that really irritated me. And then also the audiobook kind of skips and repeats random words or phrases or sentences, so it's not very well put together. So if you are going to read this book, I would recommend probably reading the physical or ebook version because listening to it on audio was kind of grating. But anyway, so this is a Cinderella retelling. In this one, the main character Elle has a really crappy stepmother and 2 really crappy stepsisters, and she wants to go to a convention because her dad started the whole thing with this Starfield fandom, but she might not get to go. And then the guy main character, Darian, he is starring in the Starfield movie and he has to go to the same convention as part of his like contract. And so it's about the 2 of them meeting but not knowing they've met, getting to know each other, losing each other, and then coming back together. It's basically a beat for beat retelling of Cinderella, just in like fandom. I'm a massive fan of anything set in fandom, and I really enjoyed this book for that reason, even with the irritating audiobook. It's very predictable. It's nothing new to the contemporary fairy tale retelling genre. I would probably, if you're not too bothered about the fandom stuff, recommend that you just watch A Cinderella Story with Hilary Duff because it's basically the same thing. But I did very much enjoy this book and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Pumpkinheads because I really wanted to reread this one in the autumn because it's very atmospheric and I love this book so much. I gave it 4 stars because it's not an all-time favourite, but it's a really good one that I'm going to keep rereading in the autumn. It's so good. It's about these 2 people who work at the pumpkin patch together, and this is their final year before they go off to college. This guy wants to go and introduce himself to a co-worker who he's always kind of seen from afar, and the girl wants to help him do that because she's a really supportive friend. And so it's kind of their journey across the pumpkin patch with all these different kind of events and things happening to stop them. It all interrupts their mission basically. I really enjoyed this one. I love the friendship between these 2. It's just wonderful. And there's also a crazy goat who keeps trying to eat people, which is always enjoyable. And then the final book that I actually finished in October, there are more to come that I'm still in the middle of, is Any Sign of Life by Ray Carson. I received this one from the publisher in exchange for an honest review and I gave it 3 stars. So this is a post-apocalyptic post-apocalyptic book. The main character wakes up from a coma at the very beginning, so it's a little bit like 28 Days Later, and she wakes up in her room and then she comes across her dead family and the crows that are eating her dead family's bodies. So it starts off really grim, and I wish it had kept up that sort of vibe all the way along, but unfortunately it didn't. It kind of got a bit dull around the 50% mark when more and more characters were introduced, and then you kind of learn exactly what's been going on and what's caused the apocalypse. It had a lot of potential, and I love post-apocalyptic stuff, but this one didn't really stand out to me, so I gave it 3 stars. And by the way, this does mention coronavirus. That's not what caused the apocalypse in any way, but it does mention it briefly in one line, so I thought I'd mention that just in case that worries you. And then finally we have the 3 books that I'm currently in the middle of that I'm just going to breeze through because I don't really want to talk about them too much. I'm going to talk about these in my November wrap up. First one is The Gift of Fear. I'm currently about 20 pages into it. So this is basically about trusting your gut feeling. It's non-fiction, and it's about how women survive and need to trust themselves in certain situations. So really looking forward to continuing on with this. I enjoy it so far. It's good. I can't wait to read the rest of it. I'm also currently reading Arusha and the End of Time. This is a middle grade fantasy book. I am quite enjoying it. It's a little bit meh right now. I'm 58 pages in and it's not really gripping me, but I'm hoping it's going to get better. The main character, Arusha, basically brings about the end of time by lighting a fantasy lamp that she really shouldn't at her mother's museum, just to prove a point to her friends, classmates rather. They're not really her friends because she's a bit of a liar. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about this one yet, but I'm going to carry on reading it and talk about it at the end of the month. And then finally, I'm also reading The Troop. I was going to read this in October, but I got distracted by so many other books. So I am 37 pages into it. I can't say that I'm hooked just yet, but I have hope that it's going to pick up, be a bit more fast paced, and that I'm going to end up really enjoying it. So those are the 19 books that I read in October and the 3 that I'm also currently reading. Let me know what you thought of any of these books in the comments down below. Hopefully this video doesn't turn out to be too long or boring and that you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll speak to you all again in my next video. Bye!